Hi, my name's Patrick Caruth, President and Headmaster of the Bear Creek School. I'd like to welcome you to Tools for Success. Tools for Success is a partnership between the school and our parents to help you in raising your students. We do a lot in the building with education, and you do a lot at home with education and raising your children. So we want to partner with you in that. So thanks for joining us at Tools for Success. I hope the content that we provide you is useful for you as you raise up children in the way that they should go. I'd also like to encourage you to be on the lookout throughout the year for other events like Tools for Success put on by the Bear Creek School to partner with you to help your student become the individual God intends.
We're so glad you are here today joining us, and I am Rachel Urban. I am the preschool division head here at the Bear Creek School, and we're grateful that you are here today. I'm going to just open us in prayer and then we'll get started. Jesus, thank you so much for this time, and I just praise you for the gift of being a parent. I pray over this event that this would help parents give them tools in their tool belt of parenting, and we just pray a blessing over this time. In your name we pray, amen. Well, again, we're so glad that you're joining us. We would love it if you use the chat feature today. The chat feature, you can send in questions, and we'd love to be able to help answer those. So feel free to use that while you're in this event if you have specific questions related to preparing your child for kindergarten. And today I'm super excited to introduce you to our speaker. Karen is just an amazing person, and we're so blessed by her leadership at the school. She's such a thoughtful leader. She's an amazing educator. She's one of the founding leaders of our school. And she's not only just the founding leader of our school, she's an amazing mom and wife. And she is also our VP of Academic Affairs. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Karen, and she's going to give you just some great content this morning that we think you're going to find enriching. So with that, please join me and welcome Karen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so thankful to be with you today. And as Rachel said, I get to oversee the people and the programs of kindergarten through grade 12, which is really a lot of fun. But I also want to say, when I first started at Bear Creek, I started as a kindergarten teacher. So I've always had an absolute love for those kindergarten years, and it was such a joy to plan the preschool programming and be talking with teachers about how we best get kids ready for kindergarten. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart, even though I spend much of my days talking about things like college readiness. And today we get to talk about kindergarten readiness, which is really a lot of fun. So my guess is that we have audience members that fall in a couple different categories. Some of you have already decided that your child is ready for kindergarten and will be going on to kindergarten next year, and you're just looking for things that you can do with them to help them be as ready as possible when the school year begins. And then some of you may be evaluating whether or not kindergarten is the best match for you for next year for your child. And so today we hope to help you with both of those areas, and the tips and the strategies that we're going to give are actually applicable no matter which category you fall into. So you've probably heard us say a lot of times at the Bear Creek School that we are really teaching the whole child, and we believe in whole child development. Our brains, and sometimes with academics and with school, we really focus on the academic part of who we are, the cognitive part of who we are, but we are whole beings. We are physical, we are social, we are emotional, and then we are, of course, those thinking human beings too that we most often relate to with school. So we're going to talk through those different areas of development, some things that you can look for to know if your child's ready for kindergarten, and then also some things that you could do to support them in that growth and development. So we're going to start off with social, not because social is the most important, but we just want to work our way through each of the areas. So When we think about kindergarten readiness and with social, we think about their ability to relate to other students, play with other students, connect with other students, and have a relationship. We also think about their relationship with the adults around them, their parents, their teachers, being able to be respectful and responsive to adults. And then we also think about with kindergarten readiness, their ability to separate from their parents and be in the care of other adults when school begins. So some of you have already experienced that, some with preschool, and some of you that's going smoothly, and some of you that's still a bit of a challenge at the preschool level. So the first thing you'll see on our list there that we would really recommend is having play dates with other children their age is a really great way to help them with their social development. And so you may have family members you get together with, or you may invite friends to have play dates with, but all of those things can be really helpful in encouraging their development and even working on skills with them during those play dates. We do some summer programs at the Bear Creek School that can also help them with some of the socialization skills before they begin kindergarten, getting ready to interact with other kids. And one of the things we would say is just when you do play dates or have them get together with a friend or even relatives, really working on specific social skills that we're trying to develop with kindergartners. So some of the key ones we've written here, which are sharing, that's a social skill that requires a lot understanding of the other person and putting yourself out of just meeting your own needs and working to meet the other person. So we really recommend that as you get ready for a play date or a social gathering that you prepare your child to work on things like sharing. And so what that would look like is just, you know, we're getting ready to go over to our friend's house and they have a child your age. And when we get there, I want you to practice using these words with your friend or your cousin or whoever it is you're playing with. Practice using the words, things like, oh no, you go ahead and have it first. I'll take my turn after you. Or how about we play together and I'll take a turn and then you take a turn. Things like that seem obvious to us in an adult world, but we need to equip our young ones with those kinds of tools. And often we get in the middle of it. They're with a friend or with their relatives and they're fighting over something. And then in that moment, we kind of back out and go, no, you need to share. Well, at that point, likely their emotions are a little high because I wanted that toy and you have that toy and I want that toy back. And it can become a bit of a battle. So what we really encourage you to do is set them up ahead of time so that they're in their head, they're realizing some of these skills that they're going to practice when they get together. So all that requires is just a little chat before you get together with them or on the car ride there, or just as you're getting ready to enter, saying, okay, we're going to practice these things. We're going to practice saying, you go ahead and have a turn first and I'll have a turn next, or let's practice sharing and share that thing together and we'll each take turns. So those are really important. Setting on words, and those are things you set your child up for with just saying kind things to the other child in advance. So modeling for them words like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me, or I really like that you the way you built that design, that's a really good design. Those are all things that take a little bit of work and a little bit of practice ahead of time, but practicing those social skills can really help. And I mentioned the saying thank you, those things like please and thank you and you're welcome, and when you get a greeting and somebody says, hello, how are you today? Practicing doing the I'm fine, thanks, how are you? Are really good social skills to begin practicing with your children and then setting them up to practice using those skills when they're interacting with other people. So those are just some ideas on some social things that you can practice ahead of kindergarten, and you can do that on your own time and at home, and that will really set them up to be able to use some of those social skills at school. I'm going to kick it over to Rachel and see if she has some other things to add on the social skills.
Thanks, Karen. I just love what you said about that part with engaging with other children that are the same age, and then also just engaging with adults too. And some of the other things I was thinking about when Karen was sharing too, some of our other social emotional skills that are helpful are looking for that attentiveness as well, and self-control. So those are all things that are those social emotional readiness skills to following directions, and even multi-step directions is another thing that you can kind of work on at home of can you go put that toy over in the basket that's underneath the desk, and trying to use more multi-step directions to help them as well, just to prepare for those things as well. I'll pass it back to Karen.
Rachel jumped into the middle there, which is the emotional skills. We talked about social skills a little bit, but the next section is the emotional skills. And Rachel mentioned some of those. Some of that the first one we have on there is responsibility, and just letting them take some things on themselves. I know as a parent, sometimes I found that it was easier to do it for them than to wait for them to do it themselves. And just small things like having a place where they hang their coat up, and it's a hook that they know when I come in, I'm responsible and I hang my own coat up, or I put my own coat away in my closet. Carrying their own bag, like sometimes it's easier just to go, I'm going to grab the bag for you and I'll bring it, because it's a lot of hassle to wait for you to carry the bag. But giving them the responsibility, saying you can take care of your own materials, and you can carry your bag out to the car. Things like tying their shoes are ways they take responsibility for themselves, and then really just putting their things away. So thinking about that, like we get home and we take our shoes off. Where do your shoes go? Your shoes go in the closet. You go ahead and take responsibility and put your shoes away in the closet. So remembering those kinds of things are all part of their training. Those little steps of responsibility add up to them being ready to take responsibility in the classroom, so that when they're ready to put their materials away, when they're finished with an activity, or they're ready to hang their coat up in their cubby when they get back from recess, or the teacher gives them instructions like Rachel said, like, before you come back to the carpet time, I want you to clean up your crayons and put your, supply box in your cubby. So you practicing some of those things at home can really help them be ready for those skills when they get to kindergarten. Another thing that we really see as a developmental milestone kindergarten is to not interrupt and not interrupt the teacher, not interrupt their peers. And that does take quite a bit of self-control, and practicing that self-control ahead of time can be very helpful for them. So one of the techniques that I like to use when my kids were little was when they wanted to speak to me, but I was busy doing something, or I was talking to somebody else, we would have them just come up and put their hand on my arm or on my side, and then practice waiting until we were finished and ready. And so their job was to put their hand there and then wait patiently until the time was right and we were ready. And then we would say, oh, Rachel, you have your hand. Did you have something you wanted to ask or say? And so little exercises like that can really help them be ready for kindergarten, where they do have to wait. The teacher might be reading a story, or another student might be telling something to the teacher, and their job is to wait until it's their turn and then take a turn to speak. So practicing those things at home can be very, very helpful. That goes along with, being able to control their impulses. When we only have 1, 2, or 3 children at home, we can meet their needs pretty quickly. At school, there's 16 to 18 students in a class, and they do have to wait and be able to control themselves and wait their turn for things. So practicing that at home can be super helpful. Respecting other students' physical space is another area that we find is helpful to work on before they get to kindergarten. Being able to keep their hands to themselves, not touching other people, being able to wait in a line and not like butt up against somebody or get in somebody else's space. And people when they're not comfortable with being touched. Those are all kindergarten readiness skills that we find are very helpful if you've practiced those things ahead of time and work on those at home. Anything else you want to share with those, Rachel?
No, those are great, Karen. I was just thinking as well with the part about finishing activities independently. Sometimes depending on the personality and temperament of your child, they may take longer to do an activity. And I know we've talked with some parents that are like, man, they're really taking a long time with this activity. And you don't really want them to be able to enjoy the activities they're working on, but also, completing a project independently where you can start to begin to work on it with them, but then give them that opportunity to kind of back away and let them have that experience of doing that activity to finish it to completion. And then again, sometimes it can be a time thing for a child, like making sure that they can finish in a certain time too. Again, not rushing it, but trying to have them realize that sense of time too can be helpful as well.
Thanks, Rachel. So, when we began, we talked about, how do I know if my child is ready for kindergarten? And some of these social emotional areas are really important in that when we teach academic skills, we try to always consider, are we teaching it at a level that they're ready for, or is this at a frustration level for them because they're just not ready for this skill yet? Because we want them to be just at that right level where the skill that we're introducing academically, they're ready for. So the same thing with social emotional skills. If you find that you're trying to introduce some of these things like taking responsibility or keeping their hands to themselves or delaying their impulsiveness and being patient and waiting, and they are just not ready for those skills yet, and you're finding that that's very, very frustrating, that is a good signal that your child might not be ready for kindergarten because they're just developmentally just not ready for that yet. And sometimes people feel like, gosh, did I do something wrong if my child is not ready for those things yet? And the answer is no. Sometimes they just need to grow and develop at their own timing. It would be similar to if your child were 32 inches tall and we wish they were, or wanted them to get to 35 inches tall. You really can't rush that. They're going to grow. They're ready to grow. And some of those social emotional skills you can't rush, or you're just going to end up frustrating your child. And sometimes that waiting just a little bit longer to begin kindergarten can make that flow smoothly all the way through. And what you end up with then is if you wait and they needed to wait, you end up with a kindergartner or a first grader just expressing those areas day after day. They experience this was just the right match for me, and I'm not frustrated, and I'm able to handle it, and I'm having great days. Sometimes we find if we place them in kindergarten too early and they're not developmentally ready, then their days are just frustrating because they're having to be working on things that they're not developmentally ready for. And we're at that frustration level of you have to sit and listen to story time without interrupting, and you're really just not developmentally ready for that kind of skill yet. So that's just a little thing for you to look for with your child. And if you're really unsure of whether your child's ready for kindergarten, it's a really good idea to talk with their pediatrician because they have some of those milestones too that they would know to be looking for, and they can help you with whether they're seeing some of those social emotional milestones as well. Or you can certainly talk to your child's teacher if they're in a preschool program, and they can help you with that kind of decision. So we're going to go ahead and move forward into some of the academic readiness skills. And just like I said with the social emotional, you want to have fun with your kids. You want it to be at a level that they're ready for and not have this be at a frustration level. So when we introduce you to some of these things to be working with them on, really try to make learning enjoyable. We want the preschool years and the kindergarten years, well, we really want all till they graduate at 12th grade to be, for them to learn that school is enjoyable and learning is enjoyable and it's an adventure. Consider your child's personality, temperament, the kind of things they like to do. So if you have an incredibly active child, then build some activeness into the types of activities you do with them. And Rachel and I will describe as we go through some of the skills, how you might make practicing those active. If you have a creative, artistic child, there's ways to practice them that bring out that artistic side of them and let them enjoy it in that way. When your child is working on these things, give really specific praise to them. They need to be encouraged and they need to not be overly criticized, because that can really shut them down if they're trying things and it's frustrating, or they're taking risks and trying something that's difficult for them. Being overly critical can really stop them from wanting to continue or grow in those areas. So give really specific praise on the things that you're seeing that they're doing well. Can be really helpful. And then we would just say you only get to have a 4, 5, and 6-year-old once. So relax and enjoy them, delight in them, and just have fun doing all these things with them as you work on these skills. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the academic skills. And the one I wanted to start with was fine motor skills. Fine motor skills are really important as they're getting ready for these years. And one of the important first skills is pencil grip. And it may sound like a small thing, but it actually can make a big difference in their ability to write going through the elementary years and even into adulthood. I know there's adults who, like, their hand cramps up every time they try to write something because they're not gripping it correctly. So it's really good to have them grip it correctly. If you're not sure what the correct pencil grip is, there's lots of things online that show where their hand should be placed on a pencil. But I will show you a little bit here. So you want it like not all the way at the end and not way up high. You want it kind of near the end. And then it's a light grip. It should have their pointer finger and their thumb, and then it should rest on their second finger, and a really light grip. If they're doing things like this or like this, you do want to gently say, hey, let's hold it like this and let's practice holding it like this. There's a lot of stores that sell things that you can put on their pencils that helps them with that pencil grip, and kids kind of like those. So if you find your child is really not using the correct grip, putting one of those on and helping them with that grip can be very, very helpful. One of the things we want them to be able to do is learn to control their pencil or crayon, and practicing those kind of things with like coloring pages or a whiteboard with pen can help them. They have great little mazes or coloring patterns or things like that. If your child is not the kind, some kids love to color and they tend to get a lot of fine motor practice. Kids who don't care for coloring, sometimes they're interested in things like mazes or designs or other ways of practicing their fine motor skills. You can even do things like putting salt in a baking pan and letting them practice their fine motor skills by using their finger instead of a pencil, and learning to just control hand move can really help. To think what else on there. There's a lot of tips on there, but one of the things we also want to really start emphasizing even at this age is the way they form their letters. Once they practice forming their letters incorrectly, it's really hard to get them to go back and form them correctly. So this is something you could really reinforce at home, because they probably are doing writing, and coloring at home. And so one thing we teach is that if it's a line letter, which line letters are any of those letters that start with a straight line. So it'd be like the lowercase letter D is a good example of that. So the lowercase letter D, we start with a line. And what we want to teach them is that you go down on your line. You always go the motion down, and you start at the top and go down, and it stops at the baseline, which is the line that they're writing on. So that's important, always that down motion. If you find that your child is starting at the bottom and going up, you want to help them practice that and say, oh, let's start at the top and go down to the line, start at the top and go down to the line. So those are line letters. And circle letters are the letters that start with the circle motion. So an example of a circle letter, well, the letter C only has a circle in it, and what we want to do is we want to go counterclockwise on circle letters. And so they start at what if you looked at a clock, it would be 2 o'clock on the clock. So we want to start at 2 o'clock on a circle letter, and we want to go counterclockwise. So that a good example of that would also be the lowercase a. Lowercase a, we would start at 2 o'clock on the clock, and we want to go counterclockwise. And if they do that, their letters will be formed more correctly. And when they learn to write in cursive, those letters will connect when they write in cursive. That's just some practice. If you're finding your child does not like to do fine motor activities, get creative, like try all kinds of different things until you can find something that they do really enjoy engaging in. I think Rachel has some resources and some ideas that she'll share with you about ways to have kids practice fine motor.
Yeah, I love what Karen was saying, because we had a child that didn't like to do fine motor. And so just like Karen was saying, the maze books were really great. We have a resource list we're going to post as well of these different things. And like Karen said, different types of pencil grips we find super helpful as well. And you can get them both on Amazon, but then there's also ones you can get at Lakeshore, so different stores. And then also these journals, we use them here at the preschool, but they're just a great way that every day you can have your child kind of draw that picture and kind of start to write some of those things that they're doing that day. You can kind of help begin to do some of that early writing. So we'll post that here in just a second in the chat too, but I'll pass it back to Karen.
All right. Well, what we find is that culturally, there seems to be a lot more emphasis on learning to read and phonemic awareness and things like that. And we are going to talk about reading in just a minute because reading is important. But I want to hit on math first because we find that there isn't enough emphasis on some of the early math skills in our culture. We want our students to be great mathematicians. Math is a foundation for so many things that they will learn. And so my first tip that you can do with your children is count, 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 count. Count everything that you can think of to make a game out of counting. So you come to a set of stairs like, hey, let's count how many stairs, up the stairs, back down the stairs. We're going to set the table. There's 8 of us. Let's set the table and count. 8 dishes. Okay, now we're going to set the table with the napkins. Let's count. 8 napkins. So super important. When they interviewed the top mathematicians in the world, those mathematicians said they counted all the time, all throughout their life. Even today, they still continue to count. So picking up toys, count. You want to count big numbers. You want to count small numbers. You want to count all the way up to 100. You want to count in groups of like 10. So they begin starting to understand those concepts of 10. One of the most important things they will learn through these years and grow in their ability to do is to develop their number concept. Each of you close your eyes and imagine the number 5 in your head. So just in your imagination, you imagine 5 anything. thing. If I asked you to rearrange 5 things in your head, you could do that. You could go, well, I'm going to put 2 of them over here, I'm going to put 3 of them over here. Now I'm going to rearrange them and put 1 over here and 4 over here. That is because you have the concept of 5 very well developed. And you can picture it in all different configurations. And young children do not necessarily have this fully developed. Some kids have it not developed at all yet. Some kids have it a little bit developed, but we really want it to be a very strong development, because when they move down the road and they have, if they have the concept of how much 5 is really concrete in their head, they can envision that 5 3 times over to be making 15. And those kids who have that really strong number concept see a fraction like 5/15 and just automatically know that that's 1/3. Kids who do not have a strong number concept, they have to literally do, an exercise of, I'm going to divide the numerator by the denominator to figure out how to reduce that fraction. So number concept is extremely important. The way you can help your child develop a number concept is by just working with objects and rearranging those objects and counting them. And counting them. And so sometimes kids like to make designs with those objects, things like toothpicks or beans or Legos, or you can use materials, but counting them and then rearranging them and talking about how many are in each group is really important number concept. So we would also really encourage you to read counting type books. That's not the same as an concrete lesson where they're actually using real live objects. It's more the symbolic things on a page, but those can be really helpful too to help develop their number concept. So count, and try to keep developing that concrete number concept. So that's a little bit about number. And then the next thing we wanted to talk about was phonemic awareness, and that's where they're recognizing that letters make sounds, and we hear those sounds all around us in the English language. And and so you want to keep emphasizing those sounds in words, and then associating those sounds with the letters. So the easiest sounds for kids to hear are the hard consonant sounds like T and D, where they can hear the duh, duh, duh. So you want to keep emphasizing those. One thing I would say is if your child is not speaking those English sounds clearly, you want to keep on working on that speech as well, because when they speak it clearly, they tend to hear the sounds correctly, and then they can read the words more accurately. If they're not speaking the sounds correctly, then it does make it really hard when they begin to read those words. They're not associating that sound, and then they don't hear the pattern of those sounds quite as well. If your family is English is your second language or third language, and you primarily speak a different language in the home, this is an area where you could really practice exposing them to the English language, really enunciating the sounds and repeating those sounds and the language a lot. A few ways to do that is having them listen to books on tape, reading aloud to them, and really expressing the sounds very, very clearly and helping them hear them all the time. There's lots of little games you can play that help them hear the sounds, sorting their toys by letter sound. Let's look for all the toys that start with T, and let's put them on the T, and just hearing that sound over and over. If you really emphasize it, like top, that's the T. I found when I taught kindergarten and then with my own kids, actually helping them identify where their tongue goes when they make the sound and what their mouth shape is. So let's take the T example. We can feel where our tongue goes on the upper roof of our mouth when we make the T sound. And so helping kids with that can really help them with their pronunciation. And it also helps their kind of physical response. Goes to our brain along with our, oh, I hear that sound and I can actually feel that sound, and then begin to identify letters and words and where I hear those sounds within words. So those are all really pre-reading skills that phonics are really important in, but even once they begin reading, continuing to hear those sounds, identify those sounds in words, will help them read at even more and more difficult levels, and then also help when they begin to write and spell words. Those are really important for them to hear those sounds really strong and clearly within words. Anything you want to add on that one, Rachel?
No, the only additional piece, and I know we're having trouble posting, I was putting this in our chat there too for everyone, that we'll send you this link later, but we have this sheet for you that's a resource list that we'll be putting in there, and it does list some different things for you with some of the phonics as well. So if you have kids that are starting to put those letters together to make those beginning words, those short vowel words. I know oftentimes it can be hard for people to find books like that. Like some of the Bob books just do short vowel. And then some of the other just like initial getting letters and sounds. Some people have liked using like Leapfrog, the Letter Factory movie, that can be really helpful too. And then also using things like Starfall, and then even into that Spalding phonograms, and we list that out for you too. It's the program we use too, as kids are in our P4, P5 program, and then up into K through third. But it really goes into those combination of letters like TH in the English language makes and so extending, and like Karen said, just really trying to emphasize where those sounds are for your mouth placement with pronunciation. But this just gives a great resource. I also, another family had recommended this, and we added this resource too, but this Endless Apps that goes through alphabet and wordplay and beginning reading. So those can be another great thing as well. So these are just some resources. And again, we'll be giving you this after the event through the email for this list of resources too. Back to you, Karen.
Thanks, Rachel. That was very helpful. We always love concrete resources that can help us with practical ways to practice these things. So thanks, Rachel. So the last thing we just really wanted to talk to you about with readiness is read. One of the best gifts you can give to your child is reading. And when they're not yet reading independently on their own at an interest level, then reading aloud to them is such an important part to become part of your routine. And then once they are reading, all right, I think that somebody's there, but hopefully you can hear me now. And if you can hear me, okay? Okay.
It's starting to come back. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. And then when you're reading with your child, there's a couple different things that you can do to help them be growing in their comprehension and their listening skills. We find that some kids, when you're reading to them, they're fully absorbed in the story, they're listening, they're learning from it. Other kids, they're not really paying attention to the story. They're thinking about, I'm so happy to be snuggled up here with my dad, or and so by asking them some questions about the story, it can really help them stay engaged in the story. So just little questions like, what do you think is going to happen next? Or why do you think she did that? Or like, look, book, he looks sad. Why do we think he's sad? Questions like that can really help your child realize that reading is about meaning, and we're trying to discover the meaning, and we're trying to enjoy the book. You don't want to ask too many questions, because that can really kill a good book if you're stopping all the time and asking questions. But asking key questions at just the right time helps them to realize that reading is about meaning, and my brain should be doing certain things while I'm listening to a book, and my brain should be in tune with the book while we're reading. Choose a variety of books and try to find the books that your child is really interested in. Sometimes we have young children who aren't as interested in fiction, and they love nonfiction books. So books about dinosaurs, books about trucks, books about, kind of some of all those different things can be really, really helpful sometimes to get them engaged in the book. So go with a little bit of your child's interest, and then the length of the book, how many pictures it has, all those kinds of things. Be in tune with what you really think your child is ready for. Visit the library. The library can help supplement your book supply and give fresh new books, but also don't be worried about repeating the same book over and over and over. It's actually really good for them to hear a story over and over and over. You might get really tired of reading the story over and over. I know that I have all of Dr. Seuss' ABC book memorized, big A, little a, what begins with A, Aunt Annie's alligator, A, big B, little B, what begins with B, Barber, Baby Bubbles, and a Bumblebee, because I had 4 children and I read that a lot of times. But it's really good for them actually to hear it over and over and over, and hear the rhythm of the language, and hear the words, and predict what's going to happen next in the story. And so don't worry about it. If they want to read the same book every night, read them the same book every night, and then gradually mix in other books as they're interested and as they're ready. If you can put aside a little, we read together every day, that's ideal. If you don't have time to read with them, even having them have a little, this is book time, this is reading time. And if they're not yet literally reading the words on the page, even just saying this is book time, put them in a quiet, nice place, surround them with books, and have them just spend time with books every day can really develop those beautiful habits of our family, we're readers and we love books, and we're going to give time that's really set aside for book time. So we really encourage you to do that with your child, and then really keep that in kindergarten and through the years. It's one of the best gifts you can give to your children is setting up habits of reading. So anything you want to add, Rachel, before I close this out?
No, I think that was great, Karen. And I think that time too with the reading, there's so many other benefits just socially and emotionally with that too. It creates that bond for you as that parent with them, but also just helps them have that time where it's attentiveness and self-control and building in that muscle as well. So I love that piece with reading. And I know Karen kind of addressed this part too with reading, but I always love when kids do start to read, parents are like, wow, that's not the most interesting book that they're starting to pick up, right? It says like Matt and Hat had a cat, and you're like, that plot line is not very exciting. We always just like to separate those two, that there's these books that they're practice books for practicing reading, and then there's these books that are just like delicious books that you're just reading for enjoyment, and soon those will bleed together. But at the beginning, it's just like when you're working on building a muscle, you're building that muscle of reading. So again, kind of just going back to some of the early reading pieces that Karen was talking about with teaching phonics, teaching letters and sounds, and that those sounds together and those letters together make words, talking kind of about those differences as well. So yeah, those were really great, Karen. And then also Karen, in her presentation today too, this has a kindergarten readiness checklist indicator too that we'll be sending you as well. It's actually from Arkansas's Early Childhood Commission. They put this out, but it just has some really great benchmark pieces for you as parents too, with that, thinking through some of the kindergarten readiness skills too. Karen, passing it back to you.
Yeah, Rachel, did we have any other questions in the Q&A that haven't been answered, or were you able to answer all of those throughout the meeting?
Yeah, it was able to answer all of this throughout the meeting. Brittany asked a really good question that I think would be great for people to hear too, but she said that wondering, going back to the number concept and piece with math, and wondering, should the number concept be for kindergarten, that we are looking at trying to get to that number concept of 5 specifically, or what should they have a good grasp on? And I answered a little bit in the chat that aiming for that number concept of 5 is great, but going beyond is great as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit as well?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. So we really consider students at this age on a continuum of like skills, and we want to take them as far as we can possibly go with them, but we want to meet them right where they are. And so as far as like, are they ready for kindergarten if they're here? Are they not ready if they're here? Number concept is still developing at the kindergarten level. So if they didn't have the number concept of 5, we wouldn't say that that is a sign you're not ready for kindergarten, but that is a pretty typical kindergarten skill to have. So that would be kind of right in the middle of the continuum of where kindergartners have. We have some who don't quite have that developed yet, and then we have many who have it developed past that. So that's kind of about a midpoint of kindergarten readiness. As far as readiness, we would expect that most kids can count up to 30 and beyond. We would expect that most kids have one-to-one correspondence by kindergarten, which means that they can point to an object and they can keep track of what they pointed to and count, knowing that each object is a separate number. And so when kids don't have one-to-one correspondence, what you see is they'll recount the same object again. So it'll be like a group of 7 things, and they'll come up with like 9 because they recounted things, not realizing that each object goes with a number. So one-to-one correspondence is pretty important. And then some sense of number concept is also really an important kindergarten readiness skill. So great question.
And Karen, another great question that just was put in the chat, and anybody who has any questions, feel free to put these in as well, but it says, do you recommend pencil grips for older kids?
Yeah, I really would if they're struggling with correct pencil hold. It can really help retrain that and help them develop that skill, because if they keep the pencil grip on, they will begin to get that pencil grip correct. And it can be very helpful. If it's super frustrating to them, it kind of depends on what age. If they've already learned to write with a different grip and they're extremely frustrated by using the pencil grip, then probably not. But if you can get them to use it and retrain and get that grip exactly right, it can be very, very helpful. If they're holding the pencil right without the pencil grip, then I would just let them continue with that skill. Good question. Any others?
Karen, and those were our last questions in the chat, unless anyone else had any other questions too. Okay, well, we know that some of these might be like individual questions that you have and you want to ask us, and feel free to. I mean, one of the things we love about the Bear Creek School is we get to partner with you. We get to share ideas, and we love it when you ask specific questions like, my child is experiencing this. Do you have ideas of how we can partner together? We'll be partnering all the way through until they graduate. We're partnering on all kinds of different things, but in this kindergarten readiness years and what we can do to make that the smoothest transition for them, we definitely want to share ideas with you and have you ask those questions so that we can be working together. So feel free to reach out at any time and ask us those questions. And we're really thankful that you were able to join us today. And we just wish you all the best through the finish of your preschool years, and hope that many of you will join us either next year in a P5 class or up at our kindergarten level. So thanks for joining us, and have a fantastic day.